Good afternoon, friends. Well, flying from Philippines, 13-hour time difference. I landed slightly before 24 hours, so, well, you know how it is. Okay. Yeah, it's about to hit me. Jet lag is about to hit. Friends, over next maybe 5-7 minutes, I will quickly tell you what we at ADB are doing about climate change considerations in EIA. I will talk a little bit about our long-term strategic framework on climate change, how the climate change is actually, what is the relation between these two. Then how we consider climate change in environmental safeguards, and some initiatives which we are trying to put in place to improve climate change considerations in EIA. Now, when we heard Bob in the morning, then you have to reflect upon those countries which are the most vulnerable. Most of them are in Asia. So mega deltas, highest population density, the food security, largest issues, rainfall, all of these issues are going to hit this area very hard. At the same time, Asia is also a major generator of GHG emissions. And no matter how we predict, Asia is going to play a very significant role. And therefore, it might not be wrong to say that the battle of climate change might be won or lost in Asia. Now, ADB working in Asia, therefore, it is extremely important for us to integrate environmental climate change, as much as possible with all of our planning and strategic thinking. And that is what the Strategy 2020 of ADB actually does. We understand that climate change will affect the poor disproportionately, and a large number of, and the mandate of all these development banks is basically to fight poverty, and therefore it is extremely important climate change considerations. Also, it was mentioned in the morning, the conflicts it might generate, and therefore we have involved a very important aspect of regional integration is one of the pillars of Strategy 2020. River basin like Mekong, which pass through about 6-7 countries. It is extremely important that those countries come together. And so therefore, ADB puts a lot of emphasis on climate change, and we have identified 5 priorities areas and 3 modalities to actually implement these things. Now, I will not go on all of these, but what I was trying to emphasize that it is not only EIA. It is far beyond that and far more comprehensive that we need to consider. The clean energy program is working quite well. We had a target of $2 billion, $1 billion per year, and in 2008, 2009, we have exceeded that, and we hope to do $1.3 billion in 2013. These are the projects, ADB climate change projects, which are both adaptation mostly and the mitigation as well. Now, climate change appears formally in our safeguards policy. We had revised after about 2-3 years long exercise. We have updated our safeguard policy. Last year, it came into force in January this year. And there are both aspects, adaptation aspects as well as mitigation aspect in the policy itself. The policy actually encourages use of strategic EIA in a more elaborate and more frequent manner. We do realize that if you want to address climate change, then strategic EIA is actually the tool. Project level considerations are generally too late to really do that effectively. Also, climate change impacts, to bring in uniformity is extremely important. What is happening, the people do consider climate change impacts on some projects and may not consider on some projects. Now, it depends upon the project manager for a particular region or the project, and therefore we are introducing actually certain additional questions in a rapid environmental impact assessment checklist, which we use to categorize a project into category A, B, or C. And based on that, the level of due diligence depends upon that. So we are introducing questions which would also let people understand from the very beginning that how vulnerable the project may be from the climate change point of view, and therefore what they need to consider from the very beginning of the project. And we can now see that the climate change adaptation is increasingly getting reflected into the projects. There are two examples I'll quickly refer to, which possibly one can say as a strategic EA. One was at Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. ADB was planning about $8.8 billion investments on a number of projects, a ring road, water supply, power projects, and things like that. And we all know that Ho Chi Minh City is one of the most vulnerable regions, and therefore, a study was done to understand that how climate change will impact this particular region, and these inputs were actually then used to plan the individual projects. Another important, I think, project which I possibly should mention is vulnerability assessment of the water sector in Khulna in Bangladesh. Khulna is not too far away from sea, and there was a danger that the sea level rise may affect the salinity and therefore the water supply source. And yes, indeed, the outcome was that, yes, the salinity will actually increase, and therefore, as an adaptive measure, the intake point was actually shifted upstream by 4 kilometers, and therefore, there were a number of no regret, options which sometimes get overlooked. They were emphasized much, much more. For example, water demand management. When we work on water supply projects, it's quite a common practice. I mean, it should be a very common practice. You also try to do water demand management, but unfortunately, it doesn't happen as frequently as should happen. So we realize that since climate change actually can impact the source itself, therefore, this is important. Similarly, more emphasis on reduction of non-revenue water, and importantly, improvement of solid waste management in Khulna. Because what actually happens that it is expected there will be more rainfall, therefore, more events of high rainfall, and therefore need to drain it out. And solid waste management, we understand, interferes with the drainage very, very badly. About 5 years ago, we all know what actually happened in Bombay. And one of the reasons possibly people also identified that the drainage capacity of the drains were clogged by indiscriminate disposal of solid waste management. On the mitigation aspect, we do understand that low carbon growth is the key and the answer. Since we work in Asia, we also have development imperatives, and therefore, it may not be possible to take very, very, clear stands on GHG emissions. What we have done at this moment, that in our safeguard policy, we have made it mandatory to actually calculate and report the GHG emissions if it's more than 100,000 tons per annum. And then, obviously, next steps will be that one will possibly see that what is the carbon intensity and what of the portfolio. One would see that how actually it is, what the trend it's taking, whether it is going down more than, farther than what the minimum what it should happen. Now, quickly, I will come to some planned activities and some challenges, some difficulties what we are facing in this work. Now, there's quite a bit of discussion on climate change uncertainties. We think that it is a very important issue. There are maybe some different opinions a little bit, but we think that it is an extremely important issue. And we have been using both statistical and dynamic downscaling. And we think that it is important, many, many countries being so vulnerable, it is important that ADB as an institution maybe in collaboration with other research institutions, develop some scenarios. And for particular time, we say that, OK, these are the scenarios to which we should actually respond to. Because we see that different people take different models, different scenarios. It becomes extremely difficult that how to plan your project. So to our mind, maybe the MDBs should have some kind of a understanding and policy that, OK, we will consider this. And when it changes, then obviously it has to be changed. Clearly, strategic EA is the answer. We have to do it more and more often. We see that there is examples now, slightly better examples, and we are trying to bring in this aspect in country partnership strategy. Now, this is the most upstream activity which happens, the dialogue with the country, where one decides that how you will develop the project, how you will identify the project, and if SEA actually can enter there, possibly that is the best way to manage it. And another thing which we think, where we have not actually done much on this, at this stage, the interventions are one-time intervention. For example, in Khulna, we took water intake point 4 kilometers upstream. Padma Bridge also, ADB has participated. The bridge design was revised to higher speeds, wind speeds, higher water current speeds, and higher elevations of water. So the designs were actually modified. But what we think, that there should be a flexibility in design. The problem here is that whatever climate change scenario is going to happen, OK, it is there. But maybe in 4 or 5 years, you realize that, oh, it is not going that way. It is going maybe much more or less. And therefore, you should not lock in into a design which doesn't give you the optimal options to revise it later. So there has to be some thought on a kind of adaptive design where you have the flexibility to change your design in future based on how climate change unfolds. Thank you, friends.